Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. The Quranic System of Sustenance. By Allama. A. Parwez. Translation. Fazal Kareem and Salayina Kareem. Chapter 5. The Quranic System of Sustenance. In the last chapter our subject of focus was the human self, and for this reason we had to make use of abstract language. Since abstract concepts are generally difficult to grasp and relate to, we feel it is important that we revisit the subject before we proceed any further. The fact is that human being is the name of both the body and the personality. Self. Combined. The purpose of life is to nourish and develop the body in order to keep it in good health, and so pave the way to also develop the human self. However, the difficulty lies in the fact that the principle of nourishing the body and that of nourishing the self stand in opposition. The principle of nourishing the body requires that we consume. My body will develop only when I eat. My body will not be nourished if I give my food to someone else instead of eating it myself. To keep up my strength and grow, I must eat. Furthermore, the way my body develops is dependent on what I eat, and not on what I give away to others. Hence the principle of nourishing the body is totally individual focused, and rests upon what and how much it can get. This is a fixed law and no one can change it. The principle of nourishing the self meanwhile is exactly the opposite. It is based on how much we give, and how we contribute to the beauty of the universe. What do we give to others to fulfill their needs? In other words, how do we contribute to the sustenance of the human race? The more we give, the more the self will grow. This is what we would call the training and development of the self. To sum up what we have discussed so far. 1. Human being is really a term for both the physical body and the self. 2. Both aspects of the human being, physical and self, require nourishment and development. 3. The body develops by taking. The self develops by giving. 4. These two principles of nourishment are totally opposed to each other. When we receive, our self does not develop, and when we give, our physical body misses out. This is the paradox with which we have to contend and for which we have not been able to find a resolution. Humanity has spent most of its history struggling with striking a balance, and has subsequently swung between deficiency and excess. One group tells us to give away all our worldly goods and to willfully neglect the body's demands. They tell us that the secret to success lies in the destruction of the body. But this is a fallacy. The human being is both self and body. Another group tells us that we should take for ourselves and thereby attain physical success. They tell us that the purpose of life is to develop our body and our strength, and nothing else. But this too is a fallacy, since again the human being is both body and self. If we neglect either one or the other, we fail in our purpose of life. Human thought has been unable to get past either materialism or spiritualism, and this is because we have not properly understood the root of the problem. As a result, the self is faced with a contradiction that is also reflected in society. Psychological conflicts in the society are termed in the Quran as fasad. Lit. Chaos, or corruption. The Quran tells us that this conflict can be easily resolved. It is possible to establish a system in which the seemingly opposite demands of body and self are simultaneously met, and so both are developed and strengthened. This type of system can be described as a Nizami Rabbubiyya, divine system of universal sustenance. Now let us review the details of this system as it appears in the Quran. We should keep both the needs of the body and the self in mind that we have already described. The Quran uses the phrase life of this world, Hayat-ud Dunya, for what we would call materialist or worldly existence, including the notions of self-preservation and protection of kith and kin, and securing the future. Over the coming pages we will use the same phrase. Contrary to this, the Quranic view of life affirms that our temporal existence, that is of the body, and the afterlife, that is the ongoing existence of the self, are both equally valid. This is the Islamic way of life, or system of sustenance. It is a system in which both the needs of the body and of the self are completely met. Hence it becomes possible to attain success and happiness in both the present and future, that is, in this world and in the hereafter. The effect of self-interest on humanity. The Quran tells us that we are concerned solely with indulging our self-interests. We continually hoard until our hunger for more becomes insatiable. They amass wealth, and thereupon withhold it from others. 70. 18. Indeed, man is born with a restless disposition. 70. 19. Restless. Halwan. In Arabic means one whose hunger for acquisition is unending. For, indeed, to the love of wealth is he most ardently devoted. 108. He who amasses wealth and counts it a safeguard / thinking that his wealth will make him live forever. 104. 2-3. We are also focused on immediate gain without considering the consequences in the long term. But they don't fear the hereafter. 74. 53. You love this fleeting life, / and give no thought to the afterlife and to judgment day. 75. 20-21. But nay, you prefer the life of this world. 87. 16. We hoard as much as we can and even become preoccupied with what we will inherit from others. And you devour the inheritance of others with devouring greed. 89. 19. We don't hoard merely to satisfy our needs, but merely for the sake of hoarding. And you love wealth with boundless love. 89. 20. Everyone competes to become richer than everyone else, and this race continues to the grave. You are obsessed by greed for more and more / until you go down to your graves. 102. 1-2. In such a society, certain groups lose touch with the rest of the community and its concerns. You are henceforth enemies to one another. 2. 36. Even family members can turn against each other. Everyone will flee from his brother / and from his mother and father / and from his spouse and his children. / On that day, every one of them will be concerned only with his own state. 80. 34-7. Instead of working for the benefit of humanity, each nation aims solely to protect its own interests. Yeah, each one of them wants to be given scrolls spread out. 74. 52. In other words, these nations do not wish to be subject to a law that might hinder their excesses. They want a license to do as they please, hence scrolls spread out. In this hellish existence, every nation also schemes to deprive other nations. Also distances itself from the rest. Every time a new people enters hell, it curses its sister people that went before, until they follow each other, all into the fire. 7. 38. In Arabic the word curse, la'ana, is better understood as putting distance between. Do not use your pledges as a means of deceiving one another in order to supersede them in wealth and power. 16. 92. Just as every individual feels that he does not need anyone else when he becomes self-sufficient, every self-sufficient nation feels secure in the knowledge that it doesn't need help from other nations. Hence no nation respects the human rights of other nations. Indeed, man transgresses all bounds / whenever he believes himself to be self-sufficient. 96. 6-7. Note the profound truth that is summed up succinctly in the 2 sentences above. Nations of this mentality become arrogant and believe they are beyond reproach. Does he, then, think that no one has power over him? 90. 5. This mentality eventually reaches the stage whereby those at the top deem themselves to be above the law. And so they will continually take as much from the public as they can, and simultaneously give back as little as possible. If we look around our own societies, we will find the same mentality persisting everywhere. Predators are constantly looking for ways to pounce and transfer money from other people's pockets to their own. They will pay as little as possible to get a job done, whilst overcharging others when they provide any service. In short, they are extremely miserly. This psychology is behind societal breakdown and chaos, and we see it across the world. The Quran offers many historical instances as evidence. In particular, it discusses the tribe of Madian and the prophet Joab, Jethro, who did his best to reform his people. He told them, "O my people, obey God alone. You have no deity, Rab, other than him. Clear evidence of the truth has now come to you from your sustainer. Give, therefore, full measure and weight in all your dealings. And do not deprive people of what is rightfully theirs. And do not spread corruption on the earth after it has been so well ordered. This is for your own good, if you would but become convinced." 7:85. Do not sit in ambush upon the roads leading to truth, thereby hindering those who believe in it, and do not seek to make the path of God crooked. 7:86. So said Shoaib, "I see you are happy with the state of things at present, but if you do not desist, I fear the penalty of a day that will encompass you in doom." 11:84. What else could follow but doom? The prophet Joab warned his people to be fair and equitable in their financial dealings. Give full measure and weight, and not to be the instigators of injustice. Always give full measure, and be not among those who cause loss to others. 26:181. He also warned that they should not be preoccupied with immediate gain, but rather should set their sights on the future. Keep your vision on the last day, and do not act wickedly on earth by spreading corruption. Fasad 29:36. The Quran has given us the specific example of the people of Madian, but as such the problem of seeking immediate gain is common throughout the peoples of the world. They hoard and they restrict resources that are otherwise freely available. The withholder of good, that is, resources that are needed by everyone, and rebellious aggressor, fomenter of distrust between people. 50:25. Thus they withhold the God-given resources that are meant to be free for all, for example, by blocking irrigation routes so that water won't reach everybody's fields. And they deny all assistance to their fellow people. 107:7. They are unwilling to spend in the way of the collective good, and even when they are obliged to do so, they give as little as possible, since they are tight-fisted, and give so little of himself for the collective good, and so grudgingly. 53:34. The Quran makes a similar statement elsewhere. Woe to those who give short measure. 83:1. Once this psychology of selfish competition reaches its peak, and every single member of society competes to take everything for himself and to leave as little as possible for all others, the system becomes absolutely corrupted and its doom is inevitable. These are the people about whom the Quran has said, when they receive their due from other people, they demand that it be given in full, but when they have to measure or weigh whatever they owe to others, give less than what is due. 83:2-3. These are people who take as much as possible and give as little as possible. But according to the Quran there is also a group that does nothing but take and gives nothing away. They live on the blood of others, whilst contributing nothing of value to their society. In Quranic phraseology they are termed mutrafin, lit. the self-indulgent. This group comprises religious leaders. Hence the Quran states, "O you who have iman, conviction, behold, many of the rabbis and monks do indeed wrongfully devour men's possessions and turn away from the path of God." 9. 34. This group also always strongly opposes any moves towards a Quranic revolution that would establish the divine system of sustenance for all. The reason for this is that they can foresee their own destruction as the outcome of this revolution. In the divine system of sustenance, every able member of society is expected to do their part towards its maintenance. There is no place for the lazy and the freeloader. But the religious elite are not in the habit of having to work for a living. Thus, wherever and whenever a voice is raised for establishing the divine system, the religious elite is quick to try and silence it. They provoke the public by declaring that this person is inventing new ideas and is attempting to lead us astray from the traditions of our forefathers. All past attempts to bring about the divine revolution have always been stifled by manipulative means, and no doubt this will continue in the future. And so it is. Whenever we sent, before your time, a warner to any community, those of its people who had lost themselves entirely in self-indulgence, Mutrafin, would always say, "Behold, we found our forefathers agreed on what to believe, and indeed, it is but in their footsteps that we follow." 43. 23. In other words, these self-indulgent people do not oppose the divine revolution out of ignorance. They do so with complete awareness of what they are doing. After all, they are parasites and are used to living off others. They will balk at the thought of not only having to earn for themselves, but also having to make the fruit of their labor available to others. Here the Quran makes a subtle point when it singles out the rabbis and monks. That is religious elite. The capitalists who exploit others still has to invest some of his own capital into their ventures and thus take business risks. But the religious elite never invest a single penny in anything, since they take whatever they want in donations from other people, and so they never need to take a risk. It becomes clear from this that the religious elite are in fact the most extreme type of capitalist. This is why the Quran singles out the mutrafin, parasitic people, before even speaking of capitalists in general. To revisit verse 9. 34. O you who have iman. Conviction. Behold, many of the rabbis and monks do indeed wrongfully devour men's possessions and turn away from the path of God. And there are those who hoard treasures of gold and silver and do not spend them for the sake of God, give them the tiding of grievous suffering in the life to come. 9. 34. From the Quranic viewpoint, these mutrafin are the ones who merely seek the life of this world, hayat dunya, which we mentioned earlier. They are obsessed solely with immediate gains and self-preservation, and they are blind as far as their own future in the hereafter is concerned. Yet ironically, whilst they believe they are highly successful and productive members of society, in reality their entire contribution to humanity weighs less than a grain of sand. Say, shall we tell you who are the greatest losers in whatever they may do? It is they whose labor has gone astray in the pursuit of nothing but the life of this world, and who nonetheless think that they are doing good works. It is they who have chosen to deny their sustainers' messages and the fact that they are destined to meet him. Hence, all their deeds come to naught, and no weight shall we assign to them on resurrection day. 18. 103-5. It doesn't take much imagination to see why such a society is doomed to self-destruct. As we have already observed, the intellect is only concerned with protecting the self, and since no one knows when he will die, he never places a limit on how much he hoards. His intellect is driven by a fear of insecurity, and so it continues hoarding up to the grave. Of course, whilst his desire to acquire is unlimited, resources are in limited supply. Thus every individual is obsessed with taking as much for himself or herself as possible, and this inevitably leads to conflict. The wider implications of this are that conflicts occur not only at the individual level, but between nations as well. Just as the individual intellect serves self-interest, so national wisdom serves the national interest, and aims to take sole control over available resources, leading to international conflict. As Jode has said, It follows that a society whose members aim at wealth, power, fame and social position is a society whose values are inconsistent with stability and contentment. Since where men value as ends in themselves goods which are limited and dividing, the possessors will be few and the deprived many, with the result that many will be restless and disappointed. Now, restless and disappointed citizens are a source of weakness and instability, as the history of European states immediately prior to the rise of fascism abundantly testifies. As far as the Mutrafin are concerned, Brifald has said, He collective organism cannot be healthy when one part seeks to thrive to the detriment of another. This is the condition of a society that lives by the philosophy of immediate gain. The thinkers of such societies observe the ensuing chaos and inevitably they come together to try and find the reasons for it. However, the Quran states that the problem is so obvious that we hardly need to set up a commission to investigate the matter. The Quran explains this in its own way. It states that people in this situation merely blame God. It is God's will, He makes life easy for some, and makes it difficult for some. 89. 15-16. But, says the Quran, this claim is completely false. In fact, they are deluded and refuse to acknowledge the truth. They console themselves by blaming the outcome of their own wrongdoings on God. In reality, they do not suffer without good reason. They bring it upon themselves, when they don't respect the downtrodden who are alone and without support. But no. Consider all that you do and fail to do. You are not generous towards the orphan, and you do not urge one another to feed the needy, and you devour the inheritance of others with devouring greed. 89. 17-19. What else then can be the fate of such people but for them to face the consequences? And his grip would be so severe, that it would have no parallel. 89. 26. That hoarded wealth shall be heated in the fire of hell, and their foreheads and their sides and their backs will be branded with it, and those people shall be told, these are the treasures which you have laid up for yourselves. Taste, then, the fruit of your hoarded treasures. 9. 35. It should be noted that this hellish outcome is not something that happens only in the afterlife, but manifests itself on earth also. Doomed is he who amasses wealth and counts it as a safeguard, thinking that his wealth will save him from calamity forever. No, but he shall indeed be left in a crushing torment. And what will explain to you what that crushing torment will be? A fire kindled by God, which will rise over their hearts. Indeed, it will close in upon them in endless columns. 104. 2-9. In other words, the rich believe they are immune from all financial crises by virtue of the size of their wealth. But when the system fails, their wealth will offer no security. In fact, it will be worthless, leaving them in a state of terror and misery. The Quran states that such people do not even achieve the status of a human being. They live like animals, which eat, drink, and then die. Leading this kind of meaningless life creates hell on earth. Indeed, God will admit all those who have conviction and do righteous deeds into gardens through which running waters flow, whereas those who reject the truth may enjoy their material life and eat as cattle eat, but shall have the fire for their abode. 47. 12. Another viewpoint. Aside from this, there is another way of life which is termed the hereafter or collective interest or pleasant life. If the subject of our earlier discussion can be summed up in the term vested interests, then this alternate viewpoint may be termed collective or open interest. The word infaq appears so frequently in various ways in the Quran that its meaning becomes quite obvious. Nafaq, from which infaq is derived, refers to a tunnel that is open at both ends. The antonym of nafaq is sarb, which is a one-way tunnel closed at the other end. The derivative word munafiq usually translated as hypocrite in the Quran. Thus actually refers to someone who enters the house of Deen through one door and leaves another open for his escape. The meaning of infaq in the Quran is to leave resources open to everyone. The word is usually translated as to spend freely. But this fails to adequately communicate the full meaning of the word. The full meaning of the Quranic phrase infaq fi sabilillah, usually translated spend in the path of God, needs proper explanation. In the Quran, in fact, bukhl is used as the antonym of infaq. Bukhl means stinginess or meanness, that is to keep to oneself, or to hold onto, or hoard. Contrary to this, the meaning of infaq is to keep open for the benefit of everyone, or open up, and to remove restrictions. Therefore any society that bases itself on the principle of infaq fi sabilillah is one in which every individual leaves open the fruit of his labor for the benefit of the collective. He/she will not place restrictions on what he/she gives away. Every member of this society will constantly keep the interest of the whole in mind, and thus will place collective interest above self-interest. They give others preference over themselves, even though they themselves are poor. 59. 9. Let us consider the following analogy. Imagine there is a drought and there is a water shortage. There is only one water pump in the area supplying a limited amount of water. But there are too many people who need to drink. In this situation, people start pushing each other out of the way to get to the pump. The Arabic term for this mentality is shuhanafs. Lit. For oneself. The Quran states that those who place the needs of others above their own are saved from selfishness, and such people will achieve prosperity in the future. They are saved from their own selfishness, so they shall attain to a happy state. 59. 9. Investing in the self. At another place in the Quran, infaq does literally refer to spending on others, but this ultimately means investing in one's own nafs. This is because, as we have mentioned earlier, the nourishment of the self is dependent on how much we give rather than take and spend for the good of your own selves. Pl. Shahanafsihi. 64. 16. The Quran has repeatedly and emphatically stated that when we leave resources open to others, it doesn't mean that others are benefiting and we are getting nothing in return. In fact, such acts serve to benefit the self. And whatever you may spend on others is for your own good. 2. 272. Whoever grows in purity, that is, provides for others, does so for the good of his own self. 35. 18. Thus the self develops through giving, and reaches a state in which neither fear nor grief shall touch it. No fear will they have, and neither shall they grieve. 274. Everything we give will be compensated in full. Whatever you may spend will be repaid unto you in full. 272. The Quran has at various places also described this giving in terms of a loan. Carts. Usually a loan implies lending in order to get it back later. But the Quranic version has an important implication which we can best illustrate by means of an analogy. When a cow chews the cud, it is chewing grass that is not yet digested. It is in raw form. When the cow subsequently swallows the cud, it is now ready for full digestion, and this in Arabic is called kariz. In the verses relating to infaq, on the surface it appears that we are giving to others, but in fact this should be understood in terms of the concept of kariz. The system of sustenance is designed such that whatever we give or loan, carts, in raw form is returned in mature, and thus more clearly beneficial form. If you offer up to God a goodly loan, carts hasana, He will doubly repay you for it and will forgive, Ghaffar, your shortcomings. 64. 17. Whatever we contribute towards maintaining the balance of our society is repaid doubly, that is, it becomes a means of security both for the physical body and for the self. Usually translated forgive your shortcomings as above, the word ghafur really means protect or succor, rather than forgive. Note that the divine system of sustenance keeps nothing for itself, but rewards for all contributions in abundance. The meaning of the Arabic word shakurun is return in abundance. From a root word meaning literally, to fill. God is most ready to appreciate. That is reward service, shakurun. 64. 17. As the self develops via the divine system, the entire human being is strengthened like a camel that is physically in good shape and so is not easily frightened. The Arabic word for physical strength and emotional composure or balance is halayam. And he makes us patient. Halayam. 64. 17. Aside from any results that would manifest themselves and become obvious, there are also some long-term implications of this system that are not immediately obvious and which we cannot perceive or foresee. He knows all that is beyond the reach of perception as well as all that can be witnessed. He is the Almighty, Aziz, the Wise, Hakim. 64. 18. It should also be kept in mind, with respect to the above verse, that God is Almighty, Aziz. Hence it is impossible for any human power to try and hinder the processes of His law. But we can't get away from God's law of requital, Makafat, because He designed it to be perfectly reliable. The Arabic word for this attribute of God is Hakim, lit. Wisdom. And so we must necessarily have conviction that whatever we put into the system will inevitably yield results, even though we cannot perceive them in the present. The Quran states that either an abundance or shortage of sustenance, rizq, occurs by way of the law of Rabbubiyya. Say, indeed my Lord, Rabb, enlarges and restricts the sustenance to such of His servants as He pleases. And nothing do you spend at all in His cause, but He replaces Kilfatun it, for He is the best of those who grant sustenance. 34. 39. In accordance with this fundamental principle, the more we contribute to the collective interest, the more risk will be returned to us. As we have already discussed, when we spend our wealth it appears to us as though we are giving it away with no return. In reality we don't lose it at all, but rather it is returned to us in a pleasing, that is different yet beneficial, form. Take the example of trees in autumn, which shed their leaves, and it may seem that they have lost them forever. Yet in the spring, the same trees will produce fresh new foliage. Hence, in the above verse, He replaces it, Kilfatun. This analogy applies to human society as well, insofar as leaving the fruit of our labor open to the collective will benefit us and bring progress in the long term. And whatever it be that you spend on others, He always replaces Kilfatun it, for He is the best of providers. 34. 39. The Arabic word Kilfatun also happens to be the word for the aforementioned fresh foliage in our Quran-inspired analogy. Another example can be found in a single grain, which, once planted, produces 7 ears, with 100 new grains in each ear. The parable of those who spend their possessions for the sake of God is that of a grain out of which grows 7 ears, in every ear 100 grains. For God grants manifold increase to whomever He wills. And God is infinite, all-knowing. 2. 261. Hence our contributions to the system are only good for us. And whatever good you may spend on others is for your own good, provided that you spend only out of a longing for God's countenance too. 272. The return will be in full, and will not come short. For whatever good you may spend will be repaid to you in full, and you shall not be wronged. 2. 272. Hence this will also strengthen the self. They spend in order to strengthen their souls too. 265. In other words, we will broaden our horizons and set the self on the path to immortality. Never shall you attain to true piety unless you spend on others out of what you cherish yourselves. 3. 92. Conversely, at another place the Quran states that whoever gives infaq out of a feeling of grudging obligation, will not be repaid. For only this prevents their spending from being accepted from them. They never spend on righteous causes, infaq, without feeling resentment. 9. 54. See also verses 2. 264, 3. 116 and 4. 28. The true meaning of giving openly. Infaq therefore means that we should not give either grudgingly, or with any expectation of receiving a reward. They give to the poor and underprivileged members of society with the thought, we feed you for the sake of God alone. We desire no recompense from you, nor thanks. 76. 9. For this reason the infaq which is given in the cause of God, that is for the higher purpose of Rabubiyah, is for the betterment of the self. He spends his possessions on others, so that he might grow in purity. 92. 18. Thus there is no question of seeking thanks or a reward. And so the Quran also states, and do not, through giving, seek to gain for yourself. 74. 6. By helping to overcome the existing shortfalls in society, that is in bringing people to socio-economic equity, we also absolve the shortcomings in the self. Could the reward of good Ehsan be anything but good? Ehsan 55. 60. Ehsan lit. Indemnification. Hence this is the full exposition of the word infaq. The Quran requires the establishment of a society in which every citizen makes infaq a principle to live by, and terms such a state Jannat lit. Paradise or heaven. A unique feature of this state is that it provides rizq, sustenance, in abundance. We already know that in the legend of Adam and heaven, he could eat whatever and whenever he liked without fear of facing shortage. Heavenly life. And we said, O Adam, you and your wife reside in this garden, and eat freely from it, both of you, whatever you may wish. 2. 35. Adam was also warned that if he made the mistake of listening to Iblis, Satan, the metaphor for a non-divine law, then he would be led out of heaven and lose its privileges. That is having the necessities of life freely provided. It is provided for you that you do not hunger here or feel naked / and that you do not thirst here or suffer from the heat of the sun. 20. 118 to 9. He was also warned, as implied in verse 20. 117. If you leave this heavenly society and choose to follow a law that is not divinely ordained, then leave aside fulfilling your higher purpose of being, you will have to toil and struggle even to meet your basic needs, and so you will lead a life of suffering. The key word fatishka in verse 20. 117 means suffering or unhappy. But Adam left his heavenly life and instead brought difficulties upon himself. The events that led up to his leaving heaven and what happened afterwards have been described eloquently in the Quran. In heaven Adam was obtaining everything wanted freely and without hardship. 2. 35. But he was also warned. But do not approach this one tree, Shajr, in case you become wrongdoers. 2. 35. So what was this tree, Shajr? A lot of commentators have offered various explanations, but we can find the answer within the meaning of the word shajr itself. Aside from tree, shajr means people living in division or discord amongst people. It also means enmity. From this we can see that shajr refers to a lifestyle in which individuals pursue self-interest. Adam was deceived by Iblis and thus he lost his paradisiacal life. As a result, Adam and his progeny became enemies to one another. 2. 36. This was the beginning of human life in which self-interest would be placed above collective interest. At another place, the Quran states that Satan told Adam, "O Adam, shall I lead you to the tree of eternal life? And thus, to a kingdom that will never decay?" 20. 120. In short, Satan was suggesting to Adam that he could achieve immortality through his children, meaning that he would live forever through them even after his own death. Hence the secret of eternal life would be to reproduce. And so the two ate the fruit of the tree. And subsequently they became conscious of their nakedness and began to cover themselves with pieced together leaves from the garden. And thus did Adam disobey his sustainer, and thus did he fall into grievous error. 20. 121. The pair thus became conscious of their nakedness, that is, they became sexually aware. And so they were tempted into committing the sexual act out of a belief that they would live on through their children. Adam therefore created a new problem for himself. First, he acted out of his own self-interest, and then he became concerned with safeguarding his progeny as an extension of his self-interest. Consequently, his children also became preoccupied with safeguarding their self-interest, and the inevitable conflicts meant that Adam lost his heavenly life. God said, "Down with you all from this garden, and be henceforth enemies to one another." 20. 123. Since we have lost our paradisiacal society, we must find a way to re-establish it. This is the purpose of life. It is possible only if the children of Adam establish a society in accordance with the divine law of Rabbubiyah. We shall send you our guidance. And those who follow my guidance need have no fear, and neither shall they grieve. 2. 38. Similar to the verse above, the Quran also states, "And anyone who follows my guidance will not go astray, and neither will he be unhappy." 20. 123. Thus it follows that falling from the garden meant that Adam now had to constantly worry about securing his means of sustenance. He was in a state of fatigue, suffering. 20. 117. However, Adam was told that if he led his life under the guidance of Wahi, revelation, then his suffering would cease and he would once again have everything in abundance. 20. 123. But if after adopting the Quranic code he strayed from it, he would once again experience destitution and suffering. Consequence of abandoning the Quran. But as for him who shall turn away from remembering me, that is, abandons divine law, his means of subsistence shall be restricted. 20. 124. The Quran also states that whenever humans establish a divine system they will return to a heavenly state. They will reside in a paradise of abundance. There they will have their sustenance by day and by night. 19. 62. The phrase by day and by night means that there will be constant abundance, and never will there be a time of shortage. This is an enduring life in which no struggle can assail us, and no weariness can touch us. 35. 35. Not once will anyone worry about meeting their needs. They will say, "All praise is due to God, who has caused all sorrow to leave us." 35. 34. In other words, these people will be grateful to God for setting them free from the worries of having to sustain themselves and their children. Since there will be no more conflict over the available resources, all feelings of animosity and jealousy will disappear. We will have removed whatever unworthy thoughts or feelings may have been lingering in their hearts. 7. 43. Thus all will have peace of mind and will feel secure. They will be received with the greeting, "Enter here in peace, secure." 15. 46. They will live together in peace and harmony. They will be like brothers, facing one another in affection, upon thrones of happiness. 15. 47. This state of abundance will be everlasting. No weariness shall ever touch them in this state of abundance. And never shall they have to forego it. 15:48. They will have gardens through which running waters flow, where they will live, gardens of perpetual bliss. 9:71. The supreme awesomeness of that day will cause them no grief. That is, even a major catastrophe on earth will not cause them distress. 21:103. People will see for themselves how God's attribute of Rab, nourishment, manifests itself in their society. In that state of happiness, they will call out, "All praise is due to God, the sustainer of all the worlds." 10:10. This is only a brief overview of a society built upon the divine law of Rabubiyah. For more details we can look at any of the Quranic verses on the subject of heaven. From these verses we can get a good idea of what kind of life we will lead in a Quranic society. The law of Rabubiyah ensures that both physical needs and inner needs, that is of the self, will be met. However, when people abandon the Quranic code, they will return to a life of anxiety and want. A man-made society will be unable to meet even an individual's physical needs, let alone the needs of his self. Thus we can see that the divine system of Rabubiyah is designed to address not just either the spiritual or the material aspects of life, but rather both together. So far in this chapter we have reviewed both material life, individual, focused on immediate gains, and the life of the hereafter, collective, focused on the future. And we have also reviewed the impact that each respective worldview has on human society. Now let us see how the Quran compares these two worldviews. The fact is that since the Quran's sole aim is to encourage the establishment of a society in accordance with the divine system of sustenance, Rabubiyah, much of the Quran is dedicated to providing the details of this system. At times it has plainly stated the principles, and at other times it has used various analogies from nature to illustrate how neatly the divine system of sustenance operates throughout the universe. It also presents examples from the history of nations that have fallen as a direct result of focusing on self-interest. Quranic claims that appeal to reason. A peculiar feature of the Quran is that it does not expect anyone to accept its claims blindly. It provides logical reasoning to support its arguments. It asks us to consider its claims on the basis of the knowledge we acquire, and to accept them only once we are fully satisfied of their veracity. In the same breath it states that we should not reject any of its claims without further investigation. If we reject the Quran's claims, then say, "Produce your evidence, if you truly believe in your claim, as against the claim of God." 27:64. The Quran also confidently asserts that try as we might, no one can actually find a valid argument against its claims on the basis of human knowledge. Humankind has no evidence to deny the existence of God and His laws. 23:117. This is a bold challenge and it is reiterated in the Quran many times. This is because the Quran's claims are not based on presumptions or any speculative concepts but are based on divine knowledge and wisdom. Thus the Almighty has no qualms in making this challenge. He repeatedly admonishes those who fail to use their God-given faculties of reason and choose to blindly follow their ancestors' traditions rather than His law. Now let us return to the main subject of our discussion, namely the two worldviews of self-interest, which focuses on taking, and collective interest, which, in accordance with the divine law of sustenance, focuses on giving. The Quran makes a clear comparison between the two. It states that humanity spends much time and energy on various aims. You aim at most divergent ends. 92:4. But however divergent these aims may appear to be, in reality all of them come down to just one of two types. Their underlying principle is either to give, or it is to take. The individual who learns to be giving will give whatever surplus he has to others, in line with the law of Rabubiyah. Thus, as for him who gives to others, and is conscious of God, and thus acts as a testimony of the ultimate good. 92. 5-6. As a result, the door will open to ease and abundance. For such a person, we make smooth the path towards ease. 92. 7. This is one of the two ways of life along with its outcome. Contrary to this, the individual who adopts the other way of life becomes preoccupied with taking and hoarding, and erroneously believes he is completely secure. But as for him who is niggardly, and thinks that he is self-sufficient. 92. 8. Such a person effectively belies the divine law in practice and brings instability to the system, and calls the ultimate good a lie. 92. 9. Consequently, the door to hardship and suffering will soon open. For him shall we make easy the path towards hardship. 92. 10. Of course it follows that such a system cannot last. Revolt will happen sooner or later, and when it does, those who hoarded their wealth will find it is worthless and cannot save them. And what will his wealth avail him when he goes down? 92. 11. They choose this selfish way of life based on a belief that the only real life is physical. This belief comes either from personal choice, or instinct. That is what they are programmed to think from the social environment they grow up in. Or it is intellectual. For example, from education, or an ideology. Either way, this is enough for them. Yet the truth is that man-made systems can never succeed in developing and evolving human life. For this reason the responsibility of evolving human life, says God, rests on him. For the sustenance, Rababiyah, of the human being, that is both the body and the self, God has chosen the code of conduct, or guiding principles, that are best for us. Behold, it is indeed for us to grace humans with guidance. 92. 12. The Almighty has taken on this responsibility because human beings are concerned only with indulging their self-interest. They are caught up in trivial pursuits and are short-sighted. They fail to account for the bigger picture, that is collective interest, and to think of the long term, that is the hereafter. Contrary to this, God accounts for the immediate and the distant, the present and the future, the individual and the collective. And behold, ours is the dominion over the life to come, that is long term, as well as over this earlier part of your life, that is short term. 92. 13. God instructs the messenger to warn people of the consequences of their individualistic living, which we can succinctly explain by means of an analogy. The produce of their fields will burn in the heat. The Quran thus states, "And so I warn you of the raging fire of hell." 92. 14. This is what happens to those who are selfish and seek ways of life that are contrary to the divine law of sustenance. This is the fire which none shall have to endure but that most hapless wretch who gives the lie to the truth and turns away from it. 92. 15-16. Conversely, a society in which every citizen works for the common good, collective interest, and thus maintains balance will be saved from ruin. For he who is truly conscious of God, taqwa, shall remain safe from it. The fire. 92. 17. In a Quranic society each and every individual will endeavor to give for the collective interest, and by extension his self-interest as well. He who spends his wealth on others, so that he might grow in purity. 92. 18. In this society no one will give with the expectation of an immediate reward, because in fact everyone will understand that they are contributing to a higher purpose, namely the sustenance, Rababiyah, of humanity. They are not expecting payment for favors received, but give only out of a longing for the countenance of his sustainer, the All-Highest. 92. 19 to 20. The positive results of living in a Quranic system will quickly become apparent. And such, indeed, shall in time be well pleased. 92. 21. Before we proceed further, it is necessary that we elaborate upon an earlier point. As we have already seen from verse 92. 12, God has said that He is the only one who is able to provide us with guidance, as human intellect is insufficient for the task. This statement is the focal point of the Quran's teachings, and from this it is obvious that Wahi, revelation, is a necessity for humans. The necessity of revelation. We have seen that the demand of the intellect is to serve the self, and likewise national wisdom dictates that we must put national interest first. In fact, the individual feels attached to the group for the simple reason that belonging to the group makes him feel secure. Neither does any individual concern himself with looking after the needs of others, nor does any nation concern itself with the welfare of other nations. In fact, according to the materialist view, the intellect is incapable of looking after the interest of others, just as my eye can only show me what it sees. And just as all my senses can serve only me, and not you, my intellect can only protect my self-interest. It follows that neither the individual intellect nor the combined wisdom of a human collective nation is capable of producing a system that has the interest of all humanity. That is the other at its heart. In order to truly take care of humanity's interests as a whole, we need guidance from a source that is objective and impartial. In Quranic terms, this guidance is available in the form of Wahi, revelation. This is why the Quran states that human intellect is not sufficient to establish a system of sustenance. True guidance can come only from God. Behold, it is indeed for us to grace humans with guidance. Wahi 92. 12. Revelation is necessary because we cannot help but try to look after our own interests, whilst God takes into account the needs of everyone as a whole. Now we return to our main subject of discussion. The Quran at another place states that people focus only on immediate gains, and fail to consider the long term. They know only the outer surface of this world's life, whereas they are utterly unaware of the ultimate things. That is the long term. 30. 7. But if, instead of speculating, they did their research, they would find that the ultimate, or long-term, secret of life is to be found in taking care of the collective interest, and not in the program of indulging self-interest. There are hundreds of departments of research in the human world, but if we consider them together we find that they all fall into one of three fundamental types. 1. Human sciences, e.g. medicine, philosophy, psychology, etc. 2. Natural sciences, for example, physics, chemistry, biology, etc. 3. Human history. The Quran states that we must investigate all three of these subject types and ask ourselves, is the universe operating on a principle of self-interest, taking, or bukhl, that is hoarding? Or is it operating on the principle of collective interest, giving, or infaq? First let us take an individual human being as a subject of human sciences. Have they never learned to look within themselves? 30. 8. In the human body, all organ and their parts are constantly working to pass on whatever they receive to nourish other parts. The stomach, liver, lungs, heart, brain, veins, arteries, and every cell in fact, are all working hard day and night to process whatever nutrient or stimulus they receive and pass it on rapidly to the rest of the body. The system of the human body is thus operating on the principle of giving. But if the stomach, for example, begins operating on the principle of taking, bukhl, and thereby stores all incoming food and fails to pass it on to the digestive system, then soon the whole body machinery stops. If the heart abandons the principle of giving, atta, For even a second, death will soon follow. If the veins and arteries cease transporting blood through the body, then the whole system will shut down. Thus we can see that life itself depends on the principle of giving. Moving on from the human sciences to the natural sciences, we can observe the same principle in action here as well. All life on earth relies on heat and light. The sun continually supplies both in abundance, and does so without holding back. This same principle applies to other natural phenomena as well, as they are all participants in the natural law of Rabubiyah. The process leads to positive results throughout the universe. If just one part was to adopt the principle of taking, there would be chaos throughout the universe. God has not created the heavens and the earth and all that is between them without truth. Hacked. For an appointed term 38. Moving on again, let us consider the third department. Looking at the history of humanity, we find that any nation operating a selfish socio-economic system that is based upon the principle of self-interest has always met its destruction. Meanwhile, the nations that have founded their systems on the basis of collective interest have prospered. And as soon as they have abandoned this principle, leading to inequity via selfish individuals, then these systems have fallen apart.